Hi, I'm Don Lombardi, and you're watching Drum Channel, and I'm really excited about our show this evening. We're here to help get you inspired, to help get you motivated, and usually that requires a little bit of practice, or if you're working with a local teacher, it requires a lot of practice. But tonight you can kind of put your sticks down and have a lot of fun learning by just hanging out and listening to and digesting what the best drummers in the world have to say. Hanging out and listening to drummers is a way that you can not only learn on Drum Channel, but it's a way we've all learned and drummers have learned throughout their lifetime. Lots of times it's something that you hear rather than something that you see that can really inspire you. And we have a great audience here tonight of drummers, about 50 drummers here from the Drummers Reality Camp. Not a bad name if I do say so myself. And the reality camp happens once a year. It's 3 days at Lama and it's 1 day here at Drum Channel. And I want you to join me right now in welcoming our panel. You know their work for sure. Neil Peart, Jim Keltner, and Dawn Perry. You know, Dawn brought to us an idea about a theme, which is part of the discussion that we'll be having this evening, about drummers that compose, and not the way that you would naturally approach composing a song as much as what it means to a drummer's playing to have the ability to compose and write. And I thought it was kind of a specialized topic at the very beginning. And then as we started talking about it, and off the top of our head, making a list of about 50 drummers in just a few moments, I got to thinking, you know, this is something that the students you need to know about and aspiring professional drummers in the world need to know about, because there's a secret ingredient here. It can't just be happenstance. I'm not going to read the list we came up with, but just think of Terry Bozzio, Narda Michael Walden, Phil Collins, Billy Cobham, Vinnie Colaiuta, Peter Erskine, Taylor Hawkins, Simon Phillips. I mean, it goes on and on. John Robinson, Marco Minimum, Chester Thompson, and very near and dear to our hearts in the early days was Louis Bellson and Max Roach. And you know, and just reading that list off, another thought occurred to me. If you look at the drummers of Frank Zappa and the drummers of Weather Report, they were all writers also. So I'm going to start by kind of passing the torch to you, Dawn, in that drummers who write, you know, how important is it for young drummers to know how to compose, if not from the standpoint of having a lot of experience on keyboard, but having the knowledge of what it takes to musically approach a song? And do you feel that it's improved your writing, or your writing improving your drumming?
It's definitely a combination of both. I started playing drums. I started playing piano before drums, and that probably helped in learning how to write later on. But certainly giving me an empathy and a sympathy with the songwriter. Once I started to actually actively write, that gave me a very different insight than just being the drummer in the group. And I know, Neil, you and I were talking about that one time, just in terms of how that informs what you tend to want to say in the context of something that you were also writing, not just playing on. That can change the sense that when you're a drummer, you tend to spend a good part of your early years accumulating a lot of technique, and you want to assimilate that in a way that you can play it all in the first 24 bars of every single piece, which we all know, we all go through that, and that's something every musician goes through, but we quickly learn that's pretty counterproductive to the songwriting process and to the songwriters. And I think that gave me, when I started to write, to step back to think, if I was singing this, what would I want to be hearing behind me? So it became a subtractive element in a way that I began to look at all the things that I could do but really didn't belong there. And so the bottom line for me was the music had to suggest it. It had to really be contained in whatever was presented to me, and usually my entire part whether I actually had an active role in writing it or I was playing somebody else's music, was already there. And that example, I'd like to bring up something that was a very important thing for me to learn. At one point I heard this story about Steve Gadd working with Paul Simon. And you might know this as well, when Paul had asked him about playing on a track, and Steve carefully listened to it and then said, "I don't hear any drums on it." And I thought, what an incredibly mature observation to make about, he could have played something fantastic on it, I'm sure, but there's a point at which you know you're crowbarring something in or it really musically belongs, and he knew the difference. And I think as you get older, maturity brings a certain degree of being able to stand outside of what you're doing as a drummer and listen to the totality of the music and respond to it that way. So I think that they probably inform it going in both directions for me.
I like the word you used, accumulating, and I think it's really important when you're starting is what you accumulate, because it also occurred to me that when you only have 10 ideas, you want to play them all, but if you have 100, you're more selective. Ironically,
That's right.
The more you have to draw from. And like Don, I started with piano, and then when I first started playing in bands, I actually learned the bar chords on guitar, so I would understand what the other guys were talking about, and when there was chord patterns and modulations and all that, just knowing the language made me feel less meek, and made me also feel more part of the music, and allowed me to understand composition and arranging of a drum part from a musical point of view. And after all, if you want to aspire to be not just the drummer, but a musician in all those ways, and whether you compose professionally too, it's knowing how to. And I would make little exercises for myself on the marimba, again, accumulating knowledge on how to put a song together, but it was really a technical exercise to improve my marimba playing. But then in that accumulation, I found I was spending time on keyboard stuff, and I thought, you know, I'm a drum set player, I'm going to go back to drum set. Same with hand drums, I got very interested in that and started spending time on it, and then went, you know, I'm a drum set player, and that's a lifetime accomplishment. But of course, those other percussive influences inform my drum set playing, just as those other musical experiences and knowledge inform my drum set playing. So for me, I chose to specialize, but I'm so much enriched by that exploration and that knowledge of learning the other instruments too.
Jim, I know you wish you had a lot more time to write. We've talked about that. And you're so much into sounds. In certain songs, and when things are brought to you, it seems like it's as much what you're going to play as it is how it's going to sound what you're going to play. Do you think about adding into certain songs when you're in that studio environment, different...
You know, I think I'll pick up on what you just said, because for me, sound has always been the thing. I remember when I first became aware of how to tune a drum, it was Russ Kunkel who told me. And Russell, it's interesting because at that time I didn't want to sound like Russell, but I knew that he knew how to do this thing that I didn't know how to do. And when he showed me, it opened up the whole world for me, like about a drum, like what I could do. It showed me that I could mess it up in a good way, which is what I've always wanted to do. I never really was able to play the way I wanted to play when my drum set sounded perfect, and that was in the studio. That's always been the thing, people would say, "Wow, what a great sounding drum set," and I would go, "Oh no, I'm not going to be into it now." So I have to. Over the years, I've gotten my way now, and I can really screw up something the way I want to do it. That also gives something for the engineer to do. That's a theory I have. If you give him a perfect set of drums, sounding perfect, all he has to do is just put the mics in the right place. And he loves saying that, doesn't he? He says, "I didn't do anything. I didn't EQ. I just put the mics in the right spot, and you did the work. It's all your great drum sound." But for me, I want him to work. I want him to do. I'm really getting off the subject, but let me explain this one more way. This may be funny to you or not. I don't know. Years ago, John Densmore from The Doors was on the radio all the time. I was just sort of starting, and the engineer, producer who did the Doors, Bruce Botnick, just happened to be the engineer that was on a lot of dates I was doing. So I would just be getting to the studio, and I was listening to the radio on the way to the studio, and I'd get to the room and I'd go, Bruce, why can't you make my drums sound like John's, man? They sound fantastic. Riders on the Storm, whatever it was on the radio at the time. And he'd say, you know what John always tells me? Why can't you make my tom-tom sound like Keltner's? So this told me, this told me something too. But he always said that John's, and John, forgive me, I'll see him for lunch probably in a few days actually. I'll cop to this. But Bruce always said, I don't know what to do with John's drums. They're just terrible. They sound terrible. But he made them sound fantastic. And the way John played them was beautifully and, appropriate. That's what we're talking about here, right? Appropriate for the songs. I mean, John Densmore was fantastic. He had very little technique. Sorry, John.
But a musical sensibility.
But a musical sensibility that just wouldn't stop, I mean, it was perfect for that band.
Yeah.
Same thing with Charlie Watts. Same thing with our friend Ringo, who never could really play a proper role.
Even Keith Moon at his best. A phenomenal instinct for a song, a vocal structure, arrangement. Much underrated.
Yeah, very, very underrated for that. Very, very symphonic, people used to say about Mooney. But that's right. It's all in how you hear how you structure, how you hear the structure, and how you add to the structure in some kind of way. But just to finish up and to your point about the sound, for me, composing has always been. I've never been able to just sit down, like I'm sure Neil does, or like you do, or like all the other guys that write so well and play drums and all. I've never been able to just sit down and play chords on a guitar or a piano. Actually on piano a little bit, once in a while. But my main inspiration for composing has always been to take a sound, like one of my favorite songs that I did back in the early 90s was when I was down in the basement putting together a steel shelf. And I kept hearing the sound every time something would fall on it or something. Pretty soon I started banging with my finger, and then I took a pencil with the eraser and I hit it, and then I hit it with a wrench and all kinds of things. So I brought my sampler down. That's a whole other story. But I brought this sampler down. I started sampling like crazy. I put them all together, and with a good sampler, you can tune them. You can get one sound, you can get suddenly a scale. Right away, I'm writing immediately. That's the way I write. I have to hear a sound, and then I have to be able to pitch that sound, and then I'm off to the races, and I can make all kinds of wonderful stuff happen. But that's the way I compose, is from sound.
And does that relate to your drumming?
And for drumming, yeah. I mean, you guys are perfect examples. When the more you write, the more you're sympathetic with the way a song. It's all about structure, really.
Yeah.
And
sonic structure too, like you're saying. Should the backbeat be on the tom here, hi hat or ride cymbal? Those fundamental choices.
Exactly, and that's the real challenge for me when I'm in the studio. If I'm in the studio for 5 days. Like say a whole project, 4 or 5 days. Sometimes it's 3 days. You'll be doing a lot of songs, and for me, the challenge is to make each song. It doesn't have to be different, like completely different, but I have to satisfy something in me, sonically, to be able to go forward and feel like I'm doing something good.
That's what Don got out of Serve the Song. That's an instinct that you build through all that accumulation. Really, it's ironic because you're collecting knowledge and experience to feed your instinct, right? And you hear that song and you feel what it ought to be. Very often I feel the texture and the drive that a certain song should have to be right from the demo with a click track or a drum machine. I get a sense of what that should convey sonically. And all of that experience allows you to go back to that root instinct and express it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's the ticket, man. It's to hear a song and to be able to respect the structure and but still be free, you know, to add your personality to it. That's the whole game right there.
Well,
Yeah, that's all you need.
I've got a question for Jim relative to that I'm curious about, because you have a really quite an amazing body of work that spans so many eras and styles, and people often ask about sonic identity, and you've had a changing sonic identity over the years by virtue of the fact that you're one of those guys, in your words a couple of minutes ago, you like to kind of mess it up, and you take things that deliberately would not be thought of as being drum set sounds, and you put them in your drum set. Now I'm curious which way it happens. If you are experimenting, you hear things you were talking about with the putting together these shelves and all the metallic sounds, and then taking something like that, finding an appropriate format for those, or do you sometimes, if you're doing a Ry Cooder record or something like that, are you listening to it and you think, you know what it really needs is it needs me to put, a cymbal and a donut on this tom-tom to get, you are notorious for doing things like that and having these really eccentric drum setups. So I'm curious where that kind of, because that's very much adding to the whole compositional element of the song, of the whole piece at the end of it, and that's a huge contribution to make.
Right. Thank you for that.
But there was a question in there. There was a question. Believe it or not.
No, I know what you're saying now. See, the thing is, here I have to. I'm looking at this tremendous drum set over here, and that's like a huge playground for me. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, God, there's so many sounds coming out of that drum set. And so you said earlier, right? You guys were talking about a drum set being like a piano, right?
The opposite. All pianos are the same, every drum set's different.
Oh, right, okay, that's what it was. Well, I was thinking in terms of 88 different tones, different pitches. And the drums, Bill Bruford said years ago in an interview, I remember, he said, my favorite chord is the bass drum and the hi-hat together. And, and then you add another element, and that's really pretty nice little triad there, right? And you go from there. And I loved how he said that. It was, but so like, for me, like I've been fortunate to I've never been in a band, like you've got a band and you write, and this is the, for you out there, this is the example you need to follow. Don't, right? I mean, is this cat, this is the guy, this is the thing you want to be able to do. You want to be able,
he makes his own rules.
Yeah, you make your own rules, you have your own band, and then play on people's records. At that point, somebody's going to want you to play, a lot of people are going to want you to play on your records, but have your own band, have your own thing, write your own music. That's it doesn't get any better than that. So
really, it's the idea, but it's idiosyncratic too. Some people are cut out to do it. You're a gypsy musically, right?
So this is so this is the thing, right? So here's the deal. See, and I've said this many times. I live in a world as a drummer. I live in the world of Neil Peart's, Vinnie's, and Marco and Virgil and all the guys, all the guys that are from another planet, and like you all, I sit amazed as I watch them play, and I love it. I love it, and I'm glad that I love it. I'm glad that it doesn't intimidate me or make me angry or to say things like, well, they get paid by the note, and stuff like that you used to hear. Fortunately, you don't hear that kind of stuff much anymore. We need to praise people that have taken the instrument to heights like that. But in order for me to exist in a world like that, I have to find something that I do, I mean, there's no way that I'm ever going to be, at that level, chops-wise. But I will say this. When you're at this stage of the game for you, at this age and at this time for you, I think it's really extremely important for you to work on your technique and get as many chops as you can. Get as much, listen to Neil and all the guys with the chops. And don't let it intimidate you. Learn it. Try to learn as much as you can. You'll go to the point where you can. And then at some point, you're going to find that that's going to serve you, but that's not going to be the thing that's going to make you be able to play like on records, for instance, if that's what your goal is. To play on records, you have to, the most important thing you can do is to learn how to play simple, and to learn how to play really simple is the hardest thing in the world, and these two guys will attest to that.
Oh, yes.
Because it's a mastery, right, at that simple
Exactly.
level. And it occurred to me what you're saying there is technique is your servant,
Right.
but in the early years it can be your master, of course. And
it
it's
should
right,
be
because
at
it's
maybe.
enthusiastic, you love playing what you play. I just learned this and it's so cool. That's natural, and it's part of your evolution to accumulate
Right.
that material and then later to learn to apply it. And yeah, the difference when you pick the simplest rock beat and listen to Steve Gadd play simply, and it's masterly, you know. Whereas when somebody's beginning in the garage, my first few years, you know, it was simple, but it was not masterly.
Yeah, but that's exactly right. You have to try to get as good as you can at anything, you know, and then you slough things off, or you pull away. I remember really being fascinated by my hands when they started to work. You know, I don't know if you guys can remember that. I remember.
Oh, yeah.
Realizing
I'm still finding
that,
out.
Yeah.
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 But when that starts to happen to you, you know, it should happen when you're very young, hopefully, and it did for me, and so that I had plenty of time to do that, and I messed up some good records by playing like that, you know. Other people would argue it. I think I can't listen to them because I just hear myself playing, having a conversation with myself, and that wasn't good. You know, but it took those kinds of things to
Well,
get me to
now,
realize-
because you're not off the hook with this question that was somewhere in that statement a minute ago, was that I'm really curious how you approach it now. If you're given a piece of music, is it a combination of a sound will present itself based on the piece of music you're given, or you have a certain area, perhaps you've been working and you think, I know now the appropriate place, because you're a real architect of sound.